So this whole month is all about trying to get you guys to really look deeply at the kind of people who you'd like to be. And that means, really taking some time to question, like, who has influenced me in my life? Where am I right now? Like last week, we discussed one principle, which I kind of teach people, which is look at your past, that's where you came from. Look at where you are now. This is where you are right now, and look at the kind of person who you are. And then look into the future and say, who is the person who I'm actually becoming based on who I have been created in my past, based on what I'm doing right now and the direction that I'm going. And this month, I really want you guys to just be really meditating on the kinds of people who you want to be. And this is something that is not distant from the Stoic approach. In fact, this is very much an approach that they would encourage us to take, because they encourage us to learn about ourselves, to really put a focus on your inner life, trying to make sure that you are trying to understand what it means to be a human and what it means to be you. That's the idea of aligning with universal nature, which is, okay, what is a human being and what's our place in this universe? And your individual nature. What is your nature as a human being, you personally? What are you going to bring to this earth? And Marcus Aurelius, I only recently realized this, but so the first book of Meditations obviously is him pretty much going through the people in his life who have inspired him and saying, from this person I learned this, and from that person I learned that. And there's some examples of good things that he learned from them, and there's examples of things that he would not like to take away from them, but is served as kind of a warning. And when I read this, I used to think, yeah, cool, this is awesome. Look at all these great tips that he can give us. But now I see it and I'm like, hang on, Marcus Aurelius was literally defining his own personal ideal. This was him sitting down and saying, this is exactly the kind of person who I want to be. And he didn't do that by thinking about just the way that he wants to live his life, but he did that by thinking about the people who had influenced him. And this is such a brilliant technique that I want to give you guys this week, and I would encourage you to take this week to actually do exactly what he did. But this idea of looking at the people in your life as examples of either good or bad to follow, absolutely brilliant. And it couldn't be more psychologically effective in terms of helping you to pick a better direction. Because when it comes to the Stoics, they did teach us, obviously, that we are social beings. And it's not even that they taught us, they just pointed it out. Like, we all know this because we are social beings. We love to be around other people, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. It's still a fact that you cannot exist and live in this world without a whole support network around you of people who are going to help you in various situations. And Marcus Aurelius embodies what it means to look at humanity and to say, I actually need these people, whether they're good or bad, I need them, and they are there for me and I am there for them. That's the Stoic approach. So today I wanted to give you a few examples, basically a few little tasty bites from his personal ideal, which he set by looking at these people in his life, to give you guys a bit of inspiration with the way that you would look at people in your own life, to kind of show you the level of depth to which he thought about these things. And the approach that I would encourage you guys to take this week, I'll give you the challenge from the start, is to simply sit down with a pen and paper or on your computer and think of the people in your life who have inspired you to be better, or who have shown you an example of what it means to embody a certain virtue or characteristic, right? So basically, when you do this, just go from start to finish. Your parents, all the way to your extended family, teachers, even, now that we have things like YouTube, now that we have things that can put us directly in front of somebody teaching us a great lesson, I would include people who I've learned from online, just great teachers who I've learned from, who have shown me something. And so, yeah, like I look at that and I think, absolutely anybody who has influenced you, write down the ways that they've influenced you, all the characteristics that they embody that you would like to embody, and this will become part of your personal ideal. So a few examples. From his mother, he said her inability not only to do wrong, but even to conceive of doing wrong. And I think this is a beautiful line because it basically encourages us to think like, what kind of person would you have to be in order to not only not do wrong, but to not even conceive of doing wrong? Like, that's an unbelievable person. And he obviously felt that strongly about his mother, that he wrote that she was such a good person. She wouldn't even think about doing wrong. And that's a really cool thing to talk about, because I think that too often we focus heavily on the side of, well, the sage is theoretically possible to attain, but in practice it's impossible. Too often we focus on the impossibility of trying to actually improve ourselves spiritually and logically. But do we realize how much we could gain if we were to become the kind of person who would not even do wrong, but also not even conceive of doing wrong? Do we realize how good it would be to actually aim at that? That's what Marcus Aurelius was aiming at. He was aiming at not doing wrong, but also not conceiving of it. He said that from his grandfather, he learned to hire good private teachers and to accept the resulting costs as money well spent. So we see that he focused heavily on his own personal education. And he said that if I can find a good private teacher, it doesn't matter how much money I'm spending, because they're teaching me how to become a better person, how to improve my moral character. And nothing is worth more than improving your moral character. So that was a brilliant insight that I found there. He said that from his first teacher, he learned not to support this side or that in chariot racing. Again, a brilliant lesson. What is the problem that we see in American politics today? People don't pick ideas, they pick sides. That's literally the problem that we see. And so because they pick sides over good ideas, the politicians will play to the audience in the way that they want to see the play go on. So the politicians are going to get involved in non-stop back and forth arguments and slander, and you did this, you did that, because it's not about ideas anymore. It's about the side that you're on. And so this idea of not picking teams, but just being happy with good ideas and looking at bad ideas as well, brilliant psychological truth. And again, a similar thing. He said that he also learned. Who did he learn this from? Dionysus. He learned to hear unwelcome truths. Brilliant. To hear unwelcome truths, because we don't want to hear unwelcome truths anymore. We're so interested in thinking that we know everything that as soon as somebody says something that goes against something that is preconceived in our own selves, that we think is true, it's an attack on us, and it shouldn't be an attack. You should be welcoming any truth, no matter what it is. He said that from Rusticus, he learned for introducing me to Epictetus's lectures and loaning me his own copy. So this was the guy who actually introduced him to Epictetus and changed his life and got him on the path of Stoicism. From Apollonius, pay attention to nothing, no matter how fleeting, except the logos, right? So this is a theme that goes throughout Marcus Aurelius. And the great thing about reading all of his personal ideal at the start here is you can actually see how he has embodied that in his own writing as well. Because so many times he points out that the one most important thing that you can do is to try and connect yourself with the logos, or universal nature, the cosmos. If you can try to do that one thing, that will do so much more benefit to you than anything else. And we see that in his writing. He also learned from Apollonius. He said to have learned how to accept favors from friends without losing your self-respect or appearing ungrateful. That one was a great lesson to me. Like there's a humility in that, right? Like sometimes people will offer you friendship in the form of help and service to you. Can you accept that service in a time of need without losing your self-respect? And also without appearing ungrateful. This is the sort of detail that he went to in terms of looking at people in his life and learning from them. From Catullus, he said, not to shrug off a friend's resentment, even unjustified resentment, but to try to put things right. You've all seen this in your life, right? When somebody is in a relationship or has a friendship, and then somebody does something that is misconceived or ill perceived on the other end. And instead of actually following up and trying to fix the situation, the relationship ends. It's like the amount of friendships and relationships that have been ruined in this world simply by a little misunderstanding or an unwillingness to put things right on both parts. It's really sad. And Marcus Aurelius here is saying, hey, listen, from this person, I learned that there's nothing more important than trying to put the friendship right, because we are meant for cooperation. He said that from his brother Severus, a society of equal laws governed by equality of status and of speech, and of rulers who respect the liberty of their subjects above all else. When I read that, I was like, man, he learned that from somebody. But think about like Thomas Jefferson, who was inspired by the Stoics. Think about who else was it? Like Washington was inspired by the Stoics. And you read this, and you read Marcus Aurelius saying, a society of equal laws governed by equality of status and of speech, and of rulers who respect the liberty of their subjects above all else. You can see it in like the Constitution, like, and we can argue all day about the fact that America has gone down an absolute wasteland right now. Like there's some terrible stuff happening, but at the end of the day, like he has influenced nations by his words. He said that from his adopted father, he learned listening to anyone who listening to anyone who could contribute to the public good. So again, humility, like anybody who has a good idea that can contribute to people in a positive way, I'm going to listen to them. And I think that there was just one more that I wanted to share. Yeah, I'm gonna put it over to this one. So he said that he learned from the gods, is what he says here. That I was shown clearly and often what it would be like to live as nature requires. The gods did all that they could through their gifts, their help, their inspiration, to ensure that I could live as nature demands. And if I failed, it's not one's fault. Sorry, it's no one's fault but mine, because I didn't pay attention to what they told me, to what they taught me practically, step by step. So again, we've done a 360 here, coming around to Marcus Aurelius's view of the logos or natural reason. It's something to be tapped into, and he felt as though from time to time he could tap into that, just like the Taoists would teach, or Buddhism, or anything. And this is such a beautiful idea. He's basically saying that, and he echoes this throughout his writings. You can see it many times. He's saying, listen, I've been given every chance to follow universal nature, to listen to universal nature, and to tap into it. So if I don't listen to it, and if I don't actually do what universal nature is telling me to do, then that's only my fault, right? They have given me whatever it is, like universal nature, the gods, whatever you call it. It's given me ample opportunities to listen and to change my life in a way that would be good for me and other people. So if I don't do that, it's not their fault, it's mine. And that's such a crazy humility, because, man, too many people we live in a world where everybody thinks that they know what's best over everything, right? And everybody seems to think that they have the answers to everything, including myself. And I find myself doing this all the time, and it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy to have this attitude that I can have absolutely every answer that I need to have. And Marcus Aurelius embodied what it means to have almost a cosmic humility, right? A recognition that you exist in this world, but you're not separate from this world. There's something to be tapped into there. There's something to be listened to, because to think otherwise is to think that you are the God. To think that you have more information than the thing that actually brought you into being. And so I just thought that was so beautiful. And this is what I love about Marcus Aurelius: this humility, this willing to learn from people, this willingness to take the lessons of people who have taught him and to try and embody them into his life. Because how often do you say, listen to a podcast? I'm calling you guys out, but I do this all the time as well, right? Like, you listen to a podcast, or you listen to a teacher, or you're just getting these ideas, and we stuff our mind with ideas, and it comes at the expense of application, right? This constant desire for new information, new ideas, just constantly stuffing ourselves. It's another form of desire. It's literally another form of our desire that is overtaking what would be good for us. I believe that it was Epictetus who said, listen, even books and information can become a scorn on your life because they overtake your actual spiritual journey, because it becomes an external. Like, books are an external. Everything outside of your own inner journey is an external. And so, if, like, I look at myself, I look at my books behind me, I'm like, every day I think, oh crap, I've got to read all these books. But then a moment comes along and it's like, well, I've got other things that I'm doing. I'm working on my own journey. I'm working on myself. I'm trying to improve myself. Whether I read a book or not it plays no part in terms of my own actual application of the principles that I already know. So Marcus Aurelius embodied that. And I wanted to have a discussion with you guys today around this idea of looking at people in our own lives and trying to learn from them, trying to take the lessons from them that would be good for us, and trying to embody them. That's the real word, embodiment. It has to be a process of learning, yes, but once you've recognized that, write it down, memorize it, and go after it. Try to embody that in yourself. So why don't we get a discussion going here? Does anybody want to jump in and share something? I believe the question of the day was going to be, like, what have you learned from somebody in your own life? What has somebody in your own life taught you that would be valuable, that you could bring into your own kind of personal journey of self-improvement? Does anybody want to start with something in terms of, a way that they've been influenced by somebody in their own life? And if everybody's too shy to jump in, I completely understand. So
I have
what
an
am
example.
I
I have
love
an
you, Tonya. You are
example.
always so willing to share, and you save me every time.
I'm a learner.
You're
I'm a
welcome.
learner. I'm just, yeah. I have an example. Is at a prior company that I worked at. I had this female coworker who we did a lot of collaborations together, but then there was a lot of at some point there became a lot of tension in our relationship, and competitive, she was quite competitive, and it really kind of just broke down our partnership in a way. But I have to say, even though our relationship might have soured, what I learned from her around her level of discipline to her craft is something that I've always taken away from her, even when I wasn't really speaking to her. Just watching the way that she works and the discipline that she gave to her work was something that I always admired and try to model in my own life. And now people think I'm quite disciplined about a lot of stuff, and I'm thinking, nah, not. I'm better, but not so much, because Michelle, she was, and this is not just comparing myself to her. This is watching the how of her work, and
Mm.
seeing it as remarkable. Now, probably she was probably too type A, so I had to kind of, pull that back a little bit, because I don't want to be that person. But yeah, it's been really good to learn the level of discipline it takes to, to develop expertise
Mm.
in my craft. Yeah.
Yeah. A more fatty, right? Like, you can learn from any situation in life, even if it goes
Yes.
sour. You can take something of value from that and learn. And that's the thing, right? Because I read this quote recently. I think it was from one of the Stoics. Uh, it may not have been. But anyway, it was very similar. It was along the lines of, focus on the idea, not the person saying the idea. And so if you're a person who picks teams, you're actually not going to see the idea within the person, right? And too often we push an idea aside because we don't like the person. And what you're saying here, Tonya, is you had somewhat of a rough relationship with somebody that could have turned you off. And that often turns people off, where they're like, cool, I've got nothing to learn from you. I don't want anything from you. But instead you said, well, you know what? She's actually very disciplined and I could use that, right? So it's like, focus on the lesson, not the person. I think that's what I take from that, which is absolutely beautiful. I wanted to share a principle that I learned from my father with you guys. I thought, seeing as we're getting into a discussion here around this idea, I spend a lot of time on the road selling for my parents' business. They do Christmas decorations over here in Australia. They basically, every small town in Australia, if you go around there at Christmas time, you'll see these Christmas decorations up on shop windows. And so, every year, I used to do selling for the company, and every year Jen and I will spend 3 weeks putting up decorations for mum and dad's company and just, go on a bit of a trip. But something that he taught me when we were out on the road, and I think it's important to preface this by saying as well, sometimes when it comes to the people who have raised us and the people who have influenced us in our own lives, and it's inarguable that parents influence us the most, right? We don't actually recognize the lessons that they taught us until we humble ourselves and recognize that we are so imperfect, right? And I think that kids, myself included, I've had this before, but there's a tendency to, kind of expect your parents to be perfect. And when they're not perfect, you immediately go into that kind of mindset of, well, I have nothing to learn with them and I'm just going to go forge my own path, right? And the past couple of years for me has been a journey of rediscovering just how lucky I was to have the parents that I did, right? And you look back on your time, and sometimes you don't necessarily have the closest relationship with your parents. Like, that's what I didn't have the closest relationship with my parents, but I've recognized recently, like, the lessons that they taught me are so profound that I didn't even see the lessons that they taught me, right? And you have to actually dig a little bit. You have to dig, and you need to see that despite the fact that, well, nobody's perfect, right? And when I become a parent, I'm going to be so imperfect, and I'm just going to be making it all up because we're all making it up. But one thing, when I went out on the road with my dad and we were selling together, which was a special time, being able to go with him as adults and go do this work together, something that he taught me was, he called it the ferret principle. Often I laugh at dad's lessons because sometimes they're just so silly, right? And that can actually stop you from seeing how good they are. But his ferret principle was, as a salesperson, he was like, listen, a ferret that goes in to catch a rabbit in a burrow, right? They use ferrets for rabbit hunting. It's going to go down every single burrow, right? Until it finds that rabbit. And it's just going to keep on going down, but it's eventually going to get a rabbit. It's the same in your own life, right? He calls it the ferret principle. He says, anything that you want to do, right? Use the ferret principle. Go down every burrow. Just keep on going down until you find that one thing that works. And then you've got it, right? And when he first taught me this, I was kind of like a, naive young salesperson. I was like, yeah, okay, right, ferret principle. I thought it was pretty silly. But when I thought about it later, I was like, damn, that's a really good principle. Anything that you want to achieve in your life, like, just go down every single burrow until you can figure out how you can actually do that. And these are the kinds of lessons that it would be helpful for all of you to kind of look at your parents, look at your teachers, and try to flesh out the tiny little nuggets of wisdom that they passed on to you that are actually really valuable. So does anybody else have anything that they want to chuck in here in terms of things that they've learned from their parents or from anyone in your life?
Hey, Simon.
Hey, yes. Oh, hey, Ben, how you doing?
Yeah, good, man. Good. Hi, everybody.
Angela, right?
This is Angela, my wife.
Hi.
Lovely to meet you, Angela. Welcome.
Yeah, We're both reading the Meditations at the moment. We've literally only just bought it. I mean, we've been into Stoicism for a while, but we've only just started on the Meditations. And actually, me personally, I've only just read the first book, and it's just incredible. Love it. We both love it.
It's heavy, hey? It's some heavy stuff.
I mean, we just connect with it instantly. I mean, it's written in such a, I don't know, relatable way. Love it so much. I don't know, Angela, you wanted to say something in particular.
I was just going to say, for someone that inspires me, is that we've been in our apartment now for nearly 10 weeks. And my daughter, who is just 7, she is just happy all the time. She just comes down, she smiles, she laughs at everything. And sometimes when I'm feeling like, because we've been in this apartment for such a long time, I just think, oh my God, I don't need to be like that. I can just be silly and be happy. So that's like one of the persons that I would say, even though she's a lot younger than me.
Yeah, no, that's nice. And that's humble, right? Because you're saying like, this kid can teach me something. And when I think of that, I think of like, even, man, we have so much to learn from people who you would not think that we have things to learn from. Like, we have so much to learn from kids and their ability to, in a crisis, to be calm. And it's like, I think of the amount of times that in the Bible it says you should become like a child, right? And these are ancient stories that are passed on. And I think there's something to that. There's something to that idea of becoming like a child, right? Because there's a lot of benefits to getting in that mindset of it's like everything's fascinating, everything's enjoyable, everything is for your benefit. And I just think that that's beautiful, like learning from your kid to just relax from time to time and to cope with the trials, with equanimity. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing it. Ben, did you want to share anything else?
No, not really. Just to echo what Angela's saying. The kids have really taught us in this, 7-8 week lockdown now. We're in Spain, by the way, guys. So like it's been heavy here. I've spoke to Simon about it, but it's been testing, and the kids have, they've been up and down. Behavior's been up and down, but they just get on with it. Just like just like when we first moved to Spain 6 years ago, we built up this, this narrative of it's going to be difficult. The kids might not adapt well to the language and the school, but they showed us that it's so much easier than than we made it out to be. And both of them perfect Spanish now, and they just adapted. They just slotted straight in when we got here, and it's been great. Hasn't been the obstacles that we initially thought.
I like that saying, find the child in you. I think that's amazing. Be the child, because it's so true. You can easily get into like a zone of like work, and actually just like, I've literally been a child for the last 6 weeks, playing with the kids, and it's been really nice. It's been really nice.
Yeah.
And like what it is like.
Yeah. No, we've learned a lot from them. So good point.
Well, it's a good lesson to learn, and I think that what it has to do with is kids are pretty much like a blank canvas. So especially if they're like 2, 3, 4 years old, you can take them to a new country and they'll pick up the new language because they're not stuffed with preconceptions about what is good and what is bad. They just adapt, right? But we start as a blank canvas almost. Obviously you've got your genetics there that's going and your own personal nature. But then society basically takes that canvas and, here's a perception, like layers in a painting, right? And it's just constant, putting more ideas in the head. And what happens, the idea of going back to being a kid, the way I see it is, like getting rid of some of those perceptions and just looking at the world for the whole picture, but not that one little annoying thing that you're focusing on now, or not that part that you're focusing on now. Look at the whole picture. And understand the opportunity in every situation in life. And I think that idea of getting rid of our perceptions that the Stoics taught us, it is akin to this idea of becoming like a child. Because how many times do you speak to a child and they've got no preconceptions? They'll say whatever they want, and they'll say the most profoundly truthful things that you could ever hear, and they don't even know it. They're just talking, right? So it's interesting stuff. And Jacek, I wanted to bring you in, brother, because I know you were going to say something as well. So welcome.
Yeah. Thanks. Hi, Simon. Hi, everyone.
Good to see you, man.
Can you hear me well? Likewise.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Look, if I have few things to say, but if I ramble on for too long, just stop me. I won't mind.
I'll do that with me as well. Can we just put that out there?
Yeah, well, I actually experimented today. Normally, when I'm attending this meeting and other meetings, I aim my attention to really be laser-like focused on what is being said. But today, when you were sharing your observations, I experimented with tuning in and out, and I entered that was really interested, that space of deep thinking. And I was reflecting and then tuning in a little bit, hearing something, and that was feeding my process. And almost like thanks to the energy of the group, I was able to have this deeper thinking that I wish I could do when I'm by myself, but it's not that easy to be that focused. And while you were talking, I made a list of people who, it's just the beginning of the list, people who influenced me. And I was very fortunate to meet some remarkable people on my way and to learn from them. And that kind of balances out the misfortune of not really having very supportive house. So it kind of balances out in my life. It was shitty the first like 20 years, but then I met some really remarkable people. And man, when I started to write those things down, I started to feel really touched and grateful for what I have learned from them. And almost like realizing, oh yes, am I honoring my teachers actually by my actions? Man, it is such a useful reminder, like just to remind me about my direction. Maybe I should put it somewhere and actually look at it daily, because this is such a remarkable thing. And I will just share one example.
Please do.
And it may not strike you as something spectacular, but this stayed with me. This left such a deep impression on me. And it is about responding to the stress, being present, and also about quality. So we had this project where we had to move from one house to another in my guitar school. And we had the rented van, and there was pressure. And I think the pressure was created intentionally, actually. So we sweat. And I'm rushing. And then I see someone whom I consider to be my main mentor in life. I'm just in this agitated state, and he's just very slowly takes this blanket that was messed up, and he just began to fold it, taking his time, slowly, with attention, with quality, folded, put it there. And I was like standing and like, nothing has been said. It was just the moment of really presence and just direct experience. And there were many situations like that, really powerful moments of learning that left more, not that exist in me, not as expressions or verbal teachings, but more like some kind of direct experiences and impressions. So that's remarkable. I feel so grateful for that now when I look at it, and I will certainly develop that list. Last year, I remember I took a conscious decision to stop to try being helpful and give people advice or teach them something, because usually people are not interested anyway. And instead, I decided to ask people. So when I met some new people, and I would discover that they know something that I don't, I would just start asking them questions a lot, because I'm kind of assuming that whoever I meet, there is always area of expertise they excel in, and I know very little about. And I actually do it with my students as well, because I teach maths. One of the things I do is I teach maths, and another thing I do is I teach Alexander technique to musicians. Some of these people are young, and I just ask them questions. I know that the young people are very good at some technical things. I just always try to, maybe not always, but this is one of my ideals, to see people as that they always have something they know more about than me. And I it took me time to develop that humility, to actually acknowledge that, yes, I know less, they know more. And now I realize this is such a fantastic advantage. And I kind of have that group of people I'm aware of, and whenever I kind of need something, I just immediately, like, phone call or message asking about something, and it makes life actually easier, because I don't have to rely so much on myself.
Yeah.
So yeah,
social
I
fabric,
hope that,
right?
yes. And so I hope that this is in the spirit of the meeting. These are my thoughts. Thank you. My thoughts.
Yeah, Jacek, that's brilliant. And I think that the biggest thing that I take away from what you're saying there is you are trying to embody pretty much the two prerequisites to actually learning in life. And that is, first, you have to have humility. You have to understand that you probably don't know as much as what you think you know. And you have to have that attention, which is what the Stoics encourage of us, right? Stoicism, I really think that overall, the big thing that we're all moving towards is a greater level of attention to what's happening in our lives. So unless you have that humility, unless you have that attention, you're not actually going to learn from the people in your lives. And think about this as well. Jim Rohn once taught that you want to be a person who people can come to because you can solve problems. And often that doesn't actually mean that you have all the answers. It just means that you're somebody who has some answers, and you know a lot of other people who have some answers, right? So you look at these people in society who, you know, that if you've got a problem and you give it to them, they can solve it, because if they don't know the answer, they've got like 6 people who they can call, right? These people embody what it means to be a social creature, right? Because it really does take a village to raise a child, right? It takes all of us to learn and to grow and to improve. And until you realize that, and until you realize that you will never have all of the answers, you won't actually learn that much from the people in your life. You might learn it subconsciously and you'll start acting in that way, but you won't actually pay attention to it. And if anybody else wants to jump in, I would love for you to do so. I just wanted to share one quick story and an example to you guys. Sometimes we don't realize as well how much of an impact we can have on other people, right? And I think that it's important to recognize that as well. So you have to start from that position of, I can learn from all these beautiful people in my life, but you also have to then return that to people. And I think of a time when I was on the cruise ships, and I had my jazz band on this cruise ship, and every night we would play in the jazz club. It was brilliant. And right next to the jazz club was the comedy club. And so I would get to know these comedians who would come onto the ship every week, brand new comedians. And just, I learned that comedians are like the most beautiful people in the world. Like, they're just so profound in the lessons that they can teach you. And I remember one night after my gig, it was probably 11 or 12 at night, and I went into the comedy club and finished watching the last set in there, and there was this comedian, Joe Yannetti, this Boston comedian. You know, he's just hilarious. He's so funny and he's so nice and he's just so dark. And you know, we sat down together, and we must have spent about 2 to 2.5 hours just sitting there with him talking to me, giving me advice about, you know, hey, here's what the cruise industry is like. Here's what you should probably do here. Here's what you should do there. You know, just unloading a whole bunch of information. And I remember walking away from that conversation thinking, this guy didn't have to sit down with me for 2.5 hours and give me the advice that he did. He didn't have to offer me that generous support. And he's the kind of person who he will give you every bit of attention. In fact, he was the one who, I think of him because he recommended read The Secret of Letting Go. This is a book by Guy Finley. And, you know, he's the kind of person who would say, listen, you got to read this because it's going to help you. You've got to do that because it's going to help you. And he embodied what it means to have a personal attention and an attention to other people and a willingness to share and to help others to grow. And so as much as we should be thinking about what we can learn, like Marcus Aurelius did, we should also be thinking about how we can then take our own knowledge and offer that in a spirit of generosity and humility to other people who will be receptive to that knowledge. So I don't know if anybody else wanted to jump in before the end of this session and add their own little bit of wisdom to the conversation.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say that even though there are people that we need to, you know, show gratitude and take lessons from with positive things, I think that equally there's things that we can take away from people that are not so good exemplars of certain details. And that kind of grows the rate of, it allows for our growth rate to sort of increase, because if we notice everyone who we come in contact with and sort of weigh the, you know, the things that they do well with the things that they don't, you can learn almost twice as fast. So I just kind of wanted to add that.
No, it's true, right? Everything in life is either like a warning or an example, right? So as long as the prerequisite to absolutely everything here is that you have to be focused on your own inner journey, your journey, right? So thinking about other people as an example of what not to do is actually an extremely effective way to learn. However, you have to have that humility there that says, well, I'm just as bad as what they're showing me, right? So I need to improve that. Because otherwise you start to think, oh, cool, I'm taking all of these lessons. Oh, you're wrong. And then you immediately become that person who nobody likes, who is only focused on everybody else's wrongdoings and not on their own. You know, like Bias, the philosopher, said the hardest thing that you can do, or was it Thales? I think it was Thales. The hardest thing that you can do is to take the advice that you give everybody else, right? And so, yeah, it's a brilliant technique, this idea of saying every single person is either a warning or an example to us of how we should live our lives. Pay attention, just pay attention, and you'll see those lessons. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Bob. Oh, by the way, everybody, Bob's coming up on the podcast this week, I believe Monday or Wednesday, discussing everything that he's doing in schools with Stoicism. And so fascinating interview there. So look out for that as well. So now, Scott, you've just taken yourself off mute, and also Walter, you guys keen to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's crazy how the current times also make this much more relevant, right? I think now with everything in crisis, it becomes actually so much easier to see good and negative examples, because you've got people who contribute to greater good and people who don't. And that's my shorthand way of thinking about living in accordance with nature, right? Is, are you contributing or taking away from something from the greater good? So yeah, I found the last couple of months to be a super powerful period, also in terms of learning and also trying to apply that back, right? Doing that so I think that this exercise at least comes at a really appropriate time too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have more opportunities to look at other people than ever before. Like, think about social media, YouTube, like news. man, like we can't escape looking at examples in our society of good and bad people. And you know, it's a good thing, but it's also bad. It's like we're just bombarded with a constant deluge of stimulus in terms of watching humanity. We're obsessed with ourselves, really. But it's helpful. You know, we live in a very transparent time, and it's easy to see. I mean, you could argue, man, I don't want to get into politics, but I do because I love politics. But man, I'm so focused on what's happening in America right now, and the battle between left and right. And it's filthy. Like every day something new comes out that is absolutely filthy, and you can look at it and you can think, okay, society is like the Stoics said, society is the mob, it's the crowd. They're obviously heading in a certain direction. I don't want to go in that direction, right? You can look at what's happening in society now, just in the same way that Epictetus, when he was growing up, was able to see the courts of Nero, right? He was able to contrast what was happening in politics with what was happening in Musonius Rufus's school of philosophy. And he was like, I don't want what they've got going on in those courts. I want what's going on in Musonius's mind, right? And so, like, we can see it. Everybody can see it right now. We can see the disgusting filth of what people are capable of. We can also see what we're capable of in terms of goodness and being able to follow a philosophical path. So it's a good time to be alive, as much as there are challenges. But Scott, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, my childhood, many parts of it were pretty miserable. I couldn't wait to get out of the house to move on to my own. But probably the one thing that I'm most grateful for is because of where I was raised, I was able to make contact with the most amazing person that I've ever met, and I married her. If I hadn't been in that situation, I would never have met my wife. And because of that relationship that I have with her, it has been such a blessing that now I'm 46 and we've been together since we were 15. That is just such a blessing to me. And regardless what mistakes were made when I was a kid, that is the thing that I'm always grateful for. You know, we all, as you mentioned, our parents aren't perfect. We all do the best that we can. And I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to remember, even in terrible times, there are positive things that can come out of them. And that's just really, really difficult to keep in mind when we're in the midst of difficult times. But some of the best things in life can come out of adversity.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Scott. I appreciate you sharing that. It's true that one thing that the Stoics help us with is to say, yeah, like exactly what you just said there. There are lessons to learn in every situation, but you have to pay attention, and you have to actually recognize that your perceptions about the world are going to do everything that they can to show you something that isn't helpful for you, right? And we are problem-solving creatures, which means that we always view the problem first. It always pops into our mind. But if you can embody the amor fati side of Stoicism, that side that says, listen, no matter what happens to you, you can find some good, or you can at least find some strength to go through it. And, you know, sometimes we have that experience that shakes us to the core and says, this is the good that you need to see, like you meeting your wife, right? Like that's a big experience for you that you can't deny. And so you look back at that time and you think, well, despite whatever tragedy you went through, or despite the circumstances you were under, you were able to, you know, meet your wife, which is a giant, huge, beautiful experience. But the Stoics say, no matter whether it's a big experience or not, we should still be looking. We should still be looking for those tiny little gems of wisdom in every situation in our life. Sometimes it takes something to shake us into being, right? But often it won't happen like that. So just start looking.